Hundreds drank the poison. Dozens laid down in perfect rows. Some never escaped the underground chambers. These are not horror movies. These are 6 true stories of cults that promised salvation and delivered death. Welcome to the dark and strange. Cults often begin with a promise, hope, love, and belonging. But history shows us that these promises can lead to terror, abuse, and death. Tonight, we descend into 6 true stories of cults that lured people in with light, only to drag them into darkness. These are not myths. These are not legends. They are real stories of devotion gone wrong. These are 6 true dark cult stories. Jim Jones was no ordinary preacher. In the 1950s, he built his reputation as a champion of equality, an unusual stance at the time. He welcomed black and white families into the same pews, preached against poverty, and promised a community where everyone mattered. For many, he was a savior. But behind the fiery sermons and charity work was something far darker. Jones demanded complete loyalty. Families who joined were urged to cut ties with anyone outside the temple. Members gave him their money, their time, even their secrets. And Jones used those secrets as weapons. By the mid-1970s, Jones had thousands of followers. But reporters began to uncover disturbing stories: abuse, manipulation, and Jones's growing addiction to drugs. His solution? Escape America altogether. He moved nearly 1,000 followers to a remote patch of jungle in Guyana. There, he promised they would build a paradise free from racism and oppression. But paradise quickly soured. The heat was unbearable, food was scarce, and guards with rifles kept watch at all hours. Those who questioned Jones were beaten, or worse. Jonestown wasn't a utopia. It was a prison camp in the rainforest. In November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan visited Jonestown after families begged for answers. At first, he was welcomed, but when a few members tried to defect and leave with him, tensions exploded. On the airstrip, as Ryan prepared to depart, Jones's gunmen opened fire. The congressman, 3 journalists, and a defector were murdered. That night, Jones told his people that soldiers would come for them all. He urged them to commit what he called revolutionary suicide. Mothers filled cups with a deadly mix of cyanide, flavor aid, and tranquilizers. Children drank first, then the adults followed. The air filled with screams, choking gasps, then silence. Parents held their children as life drained away. Whole families collapsed together in the dirt. By the end, 918 people were dead. And Jim Jones? He didn't drink. He was found with a single gunshot wound to the head. To this day, no one knows if he pulled the trigger himself or if one of his guards ended it for him. Jonestown was more than a tragedy. It was a warning. A reminder of how one man's charisma could bend love into fear and faith into mass death. In the 1970s, a soft-spoken nurse named Bonnie Nettles and a troubled music teacher named Marshall Applewhite claimed they were no ordinary humans. They called themselves Ti and Do, believing they were chosen by higher beings to guide humanity to the next level of existence. Their message was strange but strangely comforting. The Earth was doomed, but chosen followers could ascend to a higher plane, shedding their human vehicles and boarding a spacecraft hidden behind a comet. To those who felt lost or rejected by the world, it sounded like hope. They called their group Heaven's Gate. For years, members lived under strict rules. No sex, no alcohol, no individuality. Everyone wore the same simple clothing, ate the same food, and shaved their heads. They referred to themselves not as men and women, but as crew members preparing for departure. In 1995, The discovery of the Hale-Bopp comet reignited Doo's prophecies. He declared that the spacecraft was finally here, trailing the comet's brilliant light. But to board it, they had to leave their earthly bodies behind. In March 1997, 39 members rented a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. They recorded farewell messages, smiling into the camera, calm and almost joyful. They spoke of excitement, not fear. Then, in groups, they mixed applesauce and pudding with a lethal cocktail of phenobarbital and vodka. Each member lay down neatly in bunk beds, dressed in identical black shirts and sweatpants, covered with purple shrouds. At their feet, every one of them wore the same black and white Nike sneakers. When authorities entered days later, the scene was otherworldly. Rows of bodies, perfectly arranged, as though staged for a ritual. The smell of chemicals hung in the air. On the table nearby was a sign reading simply, "Red Alert, Hale-Bopp comes." They believed they were boarding a ship to salvation. Instead, they left behind one of the most haunting mass suicides in modern history. In the late 1980s, a secretive group emerged in Europe, the Order of the Solar Temple. Led by Joseph DiMambro, a con man with a talent for theatrics, and Luc Jouret, a charismatic doctor, the cult promised spiritual enlightenment and a path to rebirth on a planet orbiting Sirius, the Dog Star. The Order's ceremonies were elaborate. Members wore flowing robes, carried swords, and gathered around burning candles. Hidden speakers projected voices from the masters of the universe, while light tricks and holograms gave the illusion of divine apparitions. To outsiders, it might look absurd, but to followers, it felt holy. They believed they were part of a cosmic mission. But behind the illusions, DiMambro ruled with greed and paranoia. He drained followers of money, claimed their children were divine, and punished those who questioned him. He convinced them that the world was corrupt, and only through death could they transcend to the next life. In October 1994, the cult's darkness came into full view. Swiss police discovered the charred remains of 48 people. Some had been shot, others were suffocated. Many were arranged in ritual circles, their bodies laid out like offerings. Among the dead were children. The temples had been set on fire, flames devouring the evidence of ritual sacrifice. Just days later, another 25 followers were found dead in Canada and Switzerland, also arranged in ceremonial patterns. Over the next few years, more orchestrated transits took place, with entire families dying in mass murder-suicides. By the late 1990s, more than 70 followers of the Solar Temple were dead. To this day, no one fully understands how many willingly chose death, or how many were forced. What is certain is that the Order of the Solar Temple cloaked murder in the language of salvation, leaving behind a trail of bodies and unanswered questions. In the 1980s, a partially blind yoga teacher named Shoko Asahara began preaching a message of spiritual awakening mixed with doomsday prophecy. His group, Aum Shinrikyo, meaning supreme truth, attracted thousands of followers in Japan. Many were not drifters or outcasts, but doctors, scientists, and engineers. Educated people who believed Asahara could guide them to enlightenment. But Aum was no ordinary religious sect. Asahara fused Buddhist ideas with science fiction visions of apocalypse. He claimed only his followers would survive an imminent world war, led by him as the Christ of the final age. Members believed obedience to Asahara could save their souls. Obedience soon meant complicity in terror. Aum secretly built chemical weapons labs. Scientists created sarin gas, anthrax, even VX nerve agent. Some defectors were murdered with these poisons. Others vanished, never seen again. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, Aum unleashed its deadliest act. 5 members boarded Tokyo subway trains during rush hour, carrying plastic bags filled with liquid sarin. At key stops, they punctured the bags with sharpened umbrella tips and walked away. The gas spread quickly through crowded subway cars. Passengers began coughing, clawing at their throats, collapsing onto the floor. Eyes burned, lungs seized, bodies convulsed. By the time the chaos ended, 13 people were dead. Over 1,000 more suffered lasting injuries, blindness, nerve damage, trauma. When police raided Aum compounds, what they found was chilling. Stockpiles of weapons, chemicals, gas masks, even a helicopter rigged to disperse toxins over cities. This wasn't just a cult. It was an apocalyptic army hiding in plain sight. Shoko Asahara was captured, tried, and sentenced to death. In 2018, he was executed by hanging. Yet remnants of Aum still exist today under new names, raising the haunting question: when a cult survives its leader, can its poison ever truly be erased? In the wilderness of Quebec, Canada, during the late 1970s, a man named Roch Thériault gathered a group of devoted followers. He called them the Ant Hill Kids, a name born from his belief that they should work tirelessly like ants, building his vision of a utopian community. To outsiders, it looked like a commune. Simple wooden cabins, followers farming the land. But inside, it was a nightmare. Roch was not a savior, he was a tyrant. He ruled with violence, manipulation, and fear. Thériault claimed he was God's prophet, destined to guide them through the coming apocalypse. His followers, mostly women, surrendered their lives to him. Over time, he fathered more than 20 children within the group, cementing his control. But devotion came at a horrific cost. Roch demanded absolute obedience. Disobedience was punished with torture, beatings, whippings, and far worse. He used knives, pliers, even blowtorches. He cut off limbs. He performed crude surgeries on his followers without anesthesia, sometimes just to prove his power. One of the most tragic cases was Solange Boilard, a loyal follower who fell gravely ill. Instead of seeking medical help, Roch insisted he could heal her through divine surgery. He cut into her abdomen with no medical training, an operation that ended in her death. Even in death, Roch desecrated her body, claiming he was conducting a spiritual ritual. For years, the Ant Hill Kids endured his sadism in silence, trapped by fear and brainwashing. But in 1989, one victim escaped and alerted authorities. When police arrived, they uncovered horrors almost beyond belief. Malnourished children, mutilated adults, and the remnants of Roch's operations. Roch Thériault was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. His reign of terror ended behind bars, where he was later murdered by another inmate in 2011. The Ant Hill Kids cult remains one of the darkest chapters in Canadian history, a story of how absolute power, wrapped in false prophecy, can twist faith into unimaginable cruelty. In the 1990s, a man named Keith Raniere presented himself as a genius and visionary. He created NXIVM, a so-called self-improvement organization. Members were told they'd learn how to unlock their potential, achieve success, and become the best versions of themselves. At first glance, NXIVM looked harmless, even prestigious. High-profile celebrities, business people, and professionals joined seminars. Courses promised empowerment, discipline, and personal growth. Followers referred to Raniere as Vanguard, treating him as a brilliant guide. But beneath the polished exterior, NXIVM was no self-help program. It was a cult. Raniere used psychology and manipulation to break followers down, then rebuild them in his image. People were pushed to cut ties with family, surrender their independence, and devote their lives to him. And there was a darker layer, hidden behind secrecy and fear. Within NXIVM was a secret subgroup called DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, master over slave women. In this inner circle, women were branded with a cauterizing pen, their flesh seared with Raniere's initials. They were forced to give collateral, compromising photos or personal secrets, ensuring they could never leave without risking exposure. Members were starved, humiliated, and told obedience would make them stronger. Some were coerced into sexual servitude to Raniere himself. What looked like empowerment was, in truth, exploitation. For years, NXIVM operated in the shadows, shielded by wealth and influence. But in 2017, brave survivors began to speak out. Journalists exposed the branding rituals. Federal investigators built a case. By 2018, Raniere was arrested in Mexico, fleeing with loyal followers. In 2019, he was convicted of sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy, and racketeering. He was sentenced to 120 years in prison. The story of NXIVM is a modern reminder that cults don't always wear robes or speak of doomsday. They can hide behind boardrooms, seminars, and smiling promises of success. From the jungles of Guyana to the subways of Tokyo, these cults left behind devastation and death. What ties them all together is not just manipulation, but the way fear, hope, and the search for meaning can be twisted into control. Cults can emerge in any form, religious, political, or even self-help. They prey on the vulnerable, disguise themselves as movements of hope, and grow in the shadows until it's too late. As these stories remind us, it's vital to question, to doubt, and to remember. When devotion demands blind obedience, darkness follows. If you found this exploration into the dark and strange chilling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell for more haunting true stories. And remember, stay curious, but stay safe. Have a good night.